Just a quick introduction while Stephen comes up here to join me. So Stephen, we've actually brought him over from Sydney. After I was like, you gotta do this, Stephen. He's like, okay, Ken, jeez. And so I always need a reason to come to Adelaide, so we did it. We did it, everyone. But Stephen is the executive director of the Living Future Institute of Australia. He's actually a qualified project architect from the UK. But he's been in Australia for a while, and he's also a qualified project manager here. You might have read a little bit about his bio, but he's been in a lot of projects, both here and abroad, at the forefront of the green building movement. So aside from talking about the things that he's really involved in tonight, he's also bringing a lot of wealth of experience and also knowledge in this field. So we're really glad to have him here today. And maybe I'll just let you do the rest.
So Adelaide's doing some really remarkable things, and I've travelled a lot, and what I always think is interesting about Adelaide is that you do a lot of things, but you don't really talk about it very much. That's kind of the difference between Adelaide and Melbourne, for example. Sorry if you're from Melbourne. So when I first came to Sydney from London, I thought, well, I'd love to see how things get built here, so I became a labourer on a building site, and I was amazed how badly things were designed and how badly things were built, and it's really good because no one checks. And when I was on that building site, I thought it's really amazing to be, an architect on a building site, seeing how things are done or not done. And these are like homes. For most people in the world, this is the biggest investment they make ever, and we're just building them really terrible things, and that's really sad to me. And so I got off the building site, and my first assignment was in a city called Wollongong, which is south of Sydney. And there was a big apartment building, 42 apartments in, and the client came up to me and he said, oh, we've been asked to change the hot water system in this building because it uses a lot of hot water, and we want to put in this really fancy system. What do you think? And I said, oh, that's cool. Why does it use so much hot water? And the client said, oh, I don't know. I said, well, why are you doing the system? They said, oh, we've asked 3 engineers. Any engineers here tonight? So 3 people like you. And they've all written reports, go through the reports. So I went through the reports. The first report, I said, well, look, why is this much hot water being used in this building? And the report said, oh, well, it didn't actually say anything. It wasn't even asked. And the second report said, oh, it's easy. Water in this building is used for washing clothes and cooking, cleaning and bathing, and watering the plants, and then we check those against the water bills, and that's the answer. And the third report, which was much more detailed, and this cost them about $80,000 to commission, it said, well, we followed this process. We got the water bills, and we measured the fixtures, and we tried to work out how much of that might be hot and how much might be cold, and then we had a guess at how long people might use those fixtures for, and then we checked them against some energy bills, and then saw if there were any leaks, and then we ended up with this graph that said this is how much water's been used in this building. And I still ask the question, but why? This is a really perfectly technical answer, but it's like asking, why are you eating these 5 rocks? And someone saying, oh, it's because I'm hungry. And that's just not really good enough, is it? So I spent 10 months in the building with the occupants and monitored them. I monitored how long they showered for, not using this method, but with humidity control in the ductwork. And what we actually found was, looking across the entire building over a very long period of time, that they had an extraordinarily high hot water usage. And people were showering. The average shower time was 18 minutes, and the longest were around 40 to 47 minutes. So we always said, okay, but why are they doing that? And can anyone guess why they were showering this long? Yeah. Second thing that was really high was an oven cooking. They were basically turning the oven on, opening the door. They were freezing. And so instead of putting in that really fancy, expensive hot water system, what we did was insulate the building. And that was the answer. And I think that's just a precursor to what I'm talking about tonight. We do a lot of the what and sometimes the how, but we really need to think about why. Why is it we're doing any of the stuff that we're doing? And so the client said to me, but how much energy is my building using? And I said, well, buildings don't use energy. People do. And if you don't find out what people are doing, then there's no point. And so we don't really understand energy in buildings. We don't really understand water in buildings. I don't think we understand materials in buildings. You may know this is some of the more recent soil pollution in the Mount Lofty ranges. We don't understand the chemicals. We actually build with thousands of chemicals in our building, known carcinogens, doing it every single day. We don't build with happiness, as I thought. On the walk between here and there, just took a few photos. Where's the joy in that? And then some of you who know how to use PowerPoint better than me, but also work in sustainable development, you often get asked this question, which I hate because I'm really into grammar. Can you do the sustainability on this, please? This is a glass tower block being built in the desert. And I said, well, yeah. So we don't really even think about where buildings are being placed. And we get these amazing buildings. It uses nearly no energy because no one wants to be there. And that is the exact point. And this is a selection of Sydney's best buildings, the world-leading buildings. And they're great buildings, but they're also open to 0.005% of all of our society. So where's the equity in that? It's horrible. And so we say, sustainability is just not enough, is it? It's really not enough. If you look at all the buildings that we build, they always have a negative impact. On the left here, negative impact, positive impact. The middle line is sort of sustainable. If we build to the building code of Australia, we end up having a pretty bad building. The best buildings use more energy than they consume. They use a lot of water. They use toxic materials. And yet, they're not even at the point of sustainable, which is in the middle. And we ask ourselves, what's the difference between all this bad and a little bit less bad? And what does that really look like? And so I think one quote that I really love is from someone called Buckminster Fuller, which you may know of. And he said, the goal is really simple. We need to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest period of time that's possible. One of the tools that I really love, and I just want to share with you, and many of you may know it, is called the Living Building Challenge. This is commonly understood as the most rigorous tool for buildings in the world. And you often see this flower, the flower as a metaphor. And the reason for that is instead of thinking about buildings as being less bad versions of what we could normally build, it's basically saying, what if you could build something like a flower? It uses all the energy that lands on it. It uses all the water that lands on it. It has no waste, no pollution. In fact, that applies to every single thing in the world, except what we make. And so instead of having all those horrible ways of building things that we're doing, we just look at it in a very simplistic way. Where are we building? What are the resources that we used? Will it be amazing? Will it be a beautiful place to be? This is the metaphor of a flower. I'll tell you about a few very quick projects. The first one is one that I'm working on, which is actually in Melbourne. And it's going to be, in theory, the world's most amazing shopping centre. This building will meet all of the aspects of the Living Building Challenge. But in particular, it's going to be a really amazing place. And we could justify the extra expenditure purely on the basis that people like fresh air, natural light, access to nature. We also will have, the site's quite big. We're, like the Living Building Challenge asked us to, we purchased a site exactly the same size as this red line here, somewhere else in the world of really high ecological value, and we pay to look after that so it never gets built on in perpetuity. We'll also have the largest shopping centre urban farm, Australia's biggest urban agriculture operation. And underneath, shops, supermarkets, cafes selling the stuff that's up there. And this is how we can justify building something that's really very unusual. There are many, many examples. This is one I barely need to talk about, but a group of 5 buildings is housing, which is in the US, in East Oregon. And it's a building that has no mains connection to water, and I know in Adelaide you'll be familiar with buildings like that. And if you can do it in the desert, though, and you can do it here, then you can do it probably anywhere. the bad thing is that we're not really accepting that within the standards. We're not really seeing that as the bare minimum that we should be doing. A really amazing building in Seattle, if you've ever been, is called the Bullitt Center. This building, as it asks for in the Living Building Challenge, it generates more energy than it consumes. How you do that, it's up to you, but can you build a building that generates more than it consumes? Not let's be 15% better than really bad, but what can you do? In this building, see, that's what Seattle looks like when they want you to visit. This is what Seattle's actually like. It's really grey, and the only option they had was solar energy. And I won't bore you with the detail, but a typical building uses this much energy on the left, and they've had to do lots of things with the heating, cooling, the tenants, the lighting, the usual stuff, to be able to fit the solar on the roof. Or to put it in other terms, a typical American building would need a solar system that big compared to the size building down there. And they did lots and lots of things until they managed to get it to almost the size of the building. And they do it through other means that are really unusual, like this is what they call the irresistible stair, where you would just want to take it instead of taking the lift. It's also where you meet people. Other buildings, materials, this is the Phipps Center, which is in Pittsburgh, which is really amazing building. So they went to choose really good materials that were non-toxic, and instead they couldn't find any. So they went to the manufacturers and the supply chain and said, can you make us this? If you do, we'll use it. And suddenly this building's have an impact way beyond its own walls. This is the Amiga Center, which is in New York. If you haven't been, it's also very, very beautiful. It's just such a place for happiness. There's people, it's a wastewater treatment facility where they do yoga. You know, it's a really amazing building, and there are many, many examples of this. Here's another one, which is in Canada, which is another living building project, which uses Choi as its main parameter. It wasn't in any of the codes, though, so they had to make that one up. And this last one is in Wollongong, which some of you will have heard of, which is Sustainable Buildings Research Centre, which actually is a really beautiful place to be, and as a result, they are using more energy, and they're using more water, and they're causing more waste. And they're having to deal with that because Living Building Challenge is basically asking you to think about this not in design terms, but how it's actually occupied, what really happens to the building once it's there. And I'm really interested in grammar. Living Building Challenge, they're kind of nouns as well as verbs. I think that's something that really is interesting, and challenge is the word, you know, but should we sort of accept anything else? And so people always say, you know, this is kind of impossible. It's really difficult. It's not impossible. You may know Roger Bannister. Anyone ever heard of this guy? Yeah. What did he do? He ran the 4-minute mile. 10 points for you in front. He ran the 4-minute mile. So until I think 1954-ish, it was considered impossible. And then he did it, and then 3 months later, someone else did it, and 10 months later, 3 more people did it, and the next year, 13 people did it, and so now school children run the 4-minute mile. And this is what it means. Or to put it in another term, our industry, I think, is really very much full of grasshoppers. So you may know this experiment. If you take grasshoppers out of the field, take 3 or 4, and you put them in jars of different heights, leave them in there for a week, take them out of those jars, and the grasshopper who's in this height jar, doesn't matter if it can jump this high, when you let him out, he will never jump higher than that again. And that's pretty much where we are right now. This is what we do. This is what we're expected to understand. And so what we're trying to say is, like, what we need are buildings that don't have a design team that think like this. We need buildings that are a bit like a Trojan horse. If you're familiar with the Trojan horse, the horse is just the distraction. The horse is just the vehicle for the stuff that's inside that's really powerful and really interesting. And I think I'd like to show you a quick video, if I may, which is of this building, which is in New Zealand. I was just there last week. And it's the first, there are only 12 living buildings in the whole world, 12 that have managed to meet such a high standard. This is aiming to be the 13th next week. And this building really does embody the whole principles of the grasshopper in the jar and the Trojan horse, and the idea that it is actually possible if you just really, really think. And so I'll leave you to watch it, but have a think about, has anyone here been to New Zealand? Cool. This is quite funny because they've got like an American-style movie making with the New Zealand pace, which I just think is, if nothing else, that's entertaining. So let's see if it works.
They reckon there's a place in Europe that the tyres never stop burning. Shocking, eh?
There's a lot of history about these places, but yeah, I don't know anything about it. I try and get the old fellas to tell me, but they don't like talking about it. Must be emotional, you know.
We're seeing a massive historical change. Who would ever thought that a government will disestablish a national park? Let these words guide our way to a greenstone door, he te tauponam, which looks back on the past and closes it, which looks forward to the future and opens it.
For Tūhoi, it will be the first central office that it has had in centuries.
One of our big challenges has been to not only design a building, but design a building which meets the living building challenge. This is something that has not been attempted before in New Zealand, and we won't know whether we've succeeded or not until a year after the building is completed.
Products that people normally use, we can't use because they either come from Europe or they contain a red list chemical. That's quite scary. You know, we're in the middle of nowhere.
This is where you come to get cell phone reception. That one you get full reception, up here you get 3 bars, so you can keep in contact with the outside world.
This thing is just not another building. It is a statement about our commitment kia papa tuanuku, kia rangi nui, ki te pūtai ao. And I think it does say that the things we say about our tikana, we mean them.
We've been done over so many times, everyone's weary. You can't just say, oh, we're going to do this and it's going to be like this and it's going to be all good and da-da-da-da, but in reality, it's not like that. That's just the hardcore truth, it's just not like that. So you'll be lucky if you get Tūhoi to come to that building.
We're here to seek your endorsement as Tūhoi. Are we ready for this? Are we ready to move on?
I come here to learn, pick up some knowledge, and hopefully it'll lead to a paying job. Because most of us are on the dole, so we're looking for that.
A living building is the word. And it has to breathe, and the only way you can breathe is through people.
Kind of interesting, there's nothing about the building in that building video, and that's very deliberate. The building's quite remarkable. I urge you to go and see it when you get a chance. It's not far from Auckland, a few hours. but what's really remarkable is all the things around that building. What's really remarkable is the way that it's completely redefined legislation between the New Zealand government or the Crown and the Maori tribe there. They came to a place where they said, look, we're not going to really want to own the land. We don't own land here. We are just the temporary guardians. And I said, but where's your site area? And they said, we don't own a site. She owns herself. And so it really, really understood, they really understood what it is that they were trying to do. And I think it was a really good fit with the Living Building Challenge. That is a bit about building if you're interested. But I'm kind of excited because, you know, when I'm in Sydney and I'm drinking something out of a bottle and I'm going, yes, I get 10 cents. Oh, shit. So I was going to bring a lot of bottles over and I thought, should I do it? And there's some amazing things happening here. I don't know of a more ambitious carbon strategy for a city. You may know Adelaide was chosen to be one of the world's smart cities by the European Union very recently. And there's just so many things that are happening here which I think I cannot wait to see what you do next. So I just want to share some of those things with you, and I'm not suggesting you have to do anything differently necessarily, but I think you're in a position to do something that most other places just aren't ready for. Thank you. Thank you.